Hey everyone. This is the first time we're embedding our webinars on the website. So bear with me for a second. Let's make sure everything is popping up where it's supposed to be. I'm going to mute myself so that doesn't make a lot of weird noise. Let's try this again. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am glad to have you all joining. I'm going to take a couple of minutes, share a couple of quick housekeeping things before we dive in. In case you're wondering, what are you watching? This is what we're about to talk about. Hopefully you're in the right place. I just realized that, the subtitle on our first slide is incorrect. Focus on the main title. We will be talking about sustainable self-care for uncertain times. I'm so glad that you all are joining me today. A couple of things, depending on where you are watching live, whether that is directly on our website because you already registered for this, or you are catching it on LinkedIn or YouTube or Instagram or wherever else, I may or may not be able to see your comments. So if you registered, I should be able to see your comments. You should see a little box that says post your comment. If you have questions along the way, I love to be interrupted, so please drop them in the comments. It may take a second for it to pop up for me, but I will continue to kind of keep an eye on that. And I know for sure if you are watching from Instagram that I will not be able to see any comments that you post from there. And I think to be mindful of time and everyone who's engaged, I'm not going to have multiple windows open. It'd be hard for me to keep track of slides and everybody in all the places, but I do welcome your comments and your questions. You can put them in the chat. It would be great if, for those of you who do see comments, give me a little like thumbs up, smiley face. The sound is okay. The video is okay, that you're able to actually watch. That would be really just great for me to know, to make sure that everything is moving smoothly before I dive right in. And so we'll take 1 or 2 minutes just to let a few more people trickle in. We had a lot of RSVPs, a lot of registrations, so I'm excited to talk with you all today. We'll do 1 more minute. Yeah. And if you do have, as I said, if you have questions or comments or anything you want to share, I would love to hear from you all. Hopefully they will pop up and populate for me as they should. All right. Well, with that in mind, it is 6:02 and I want to be super mindful of our time. So we're going to jump right in. Let's change this. So welcome to webinar number 1 of our 12-week fall webinar series. I am really excited about kicking things off, and it's World Mental Health Day. So what better day for us to be talking about our mental health, and in particular, how do we take the best care of ourselves? I think that's one of the most important things that we can do when we're thinking about mental health. Is yes, finding a great therapist is super helpful. Looking at your relationships, if appropriate, based on your doctor and your diagnosis, if taking meds is helpful. There are lots of things that we can do. But at the end of the day, all of those really kind of boil down to how do we take care of ourselves? And I think uncertainty can create a lot of stress for us, something I think that many of us have been confronting over the last several years. And I want to talk about how do we make self-care sustainable? What are the real strategies that really work, that allow you to tend to your mental health in a way that is meaningful, sustainable, and actually helps you thrive? So Before we jump in, it's always nice to get an introduction. So, my name is Esther Boykin. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been doing that for, oh gosh, 20 plus years, quite a long time. Um, and I'm the founder and the CEO of Group Therapy Associates. And next month will mark our 15th year in business. So I am just honored to continue to do the work that we do and to grow the practice. My passion is, well, multifaceted, but in the case of this webinar and my clinical work, my role more so as a therapist than as a CEO or speaker is really helping people cultivate self-compassion, true, deep emotional intimacy, and honestly, just showing up as your full self and really understanding what that looks like. And I think that self-compassion and our ability to show up whole to all the parts of our life is very much intertwined. And I'll talk a little bit more about that today. A couple of fun facts. I am a lover of good coffee and great wine and beautiful design. People are like, what would you do if you were not a therapist? I would probably be an interior designer or event planner or something that just allows me to buy wallpaper and shop for beautiful dishware and all kinds of home goods and candles and all the things that make spaces pretty. I like to think that my obsession with beautiful spaces is tied also to my obsession with creating comfort and safety and care for individuals. I often joke that I like to live up to my Jamaican roots, or at least the stereotype of my Jamaican roots. I have many, many, many jobs. I will not talk about them all here today, but you can certainly visit the website and find out more about my podcasts and my books and my speaking and my all the things and my retreats and all of that. And then I swap out these fun facts, fairly regularly, just in case people are showing up for more than one webinar. And I rarely talk about this, but I actually have an honorary doctoral degree from Lewis and Clark College, which I have to say I'm very proud of. I don't know that I imagined that at this point in my life, in my career, I would have had the honor of giving a commencement speech and being in a position to do that. So just a little fun fact about me. So I promise, I know there's a lot of words on this slide, but I'm going to take literally 90 seconds to just tell you a little bit about who Group Therapy Associates is I'm really just going to focus on what is our framework for therapy. I'm sure you've heard about a lot of different modalities and theoretical perspectives and all of those things. At GTA, no matter what the expertise of our therapists, no matter what sort of model they follow, this is the framework for not only how we work with our clients, but how we work with each other. As I mentioned earlier, my passion is helping you show up fully for your whole life. And the way that we do that is this three-pronged approach: intellectual curiosity. This means you're going to learn a lot of things. We want to focus on both our intuitive wisdom, but also a lot of book smarts. I grew up with two educators as parents, so I am obsessed with books and research and notes and just learning. And I think when we have that intellectual curiosity, it creates a lot of clarity in our lives. And that applies to our mental health, that applies to our relational well-being as well. Second is emotional awareness. If we don't know what we're feeling, it's very difficult to be thoughtful about our words and our actions. And so emotional awareness and honoring the fact that our feelings are important pieces of data to combine with all of the things that we learn, all the book things we learn, all the head stuff. And then finally, intentional impact. And this is really the model that we like to use for all of our webinars as well. I want you to learn something. I want you to feel something. And when this is over, I want you to feel empowered to go do something different in your life, in your relationship, in your community. This is what we're all about at Group Therapy Associates, and to do so in ways that feel culturally relevant and accessible, which is part of the reason that this webinar is free. Now let's jump in. At the end of this webinar, you will understand how uncertainty impacts your mental health and why self-care is often not enough. Learn all about self-compassion because, as I said, it's my favorite thing. The 3 pillars and how self-compassion truly helps you thrive. And then we're going to talk about some very concrete strategies to create your own self-compassion practice, to have something that you can tangibly implement in your life going forward to make your self-nurturance sustainable and meaningful. So let's talk about uncertainty and stress. I think I said this earlier, but I want to just sort of highlight here, like there was just a hurricane. There is, as there often is, really as there always is, I think in modern time, war and conflict happening across the globe. There, if you're in the US, we have an election coming up that I think has a lot of us feeling very uncertain about what's going to happen next. There's a lot of um, division, polarization, I really want to say, actually, in terms of how people are feeling about this upcoming election and the various candidates at all levels. So there's sort of this macro level of uncertainty, unpredictability, things that are happening that are creating stress. But uncertainty is not just about the world around us, it is also something that we feel in our immediate lives, in our at an interpersonal or at a micro level. So that could be anything from maybe you're experiencing a lot of job stress. On a personal level, I have two friends who, there's been significant changes in their boss, in the structure of the, sort of their division or their department. Like there is a lot of upheaval and unpredictability, uncertainty about what's going to happen next and what's expected of them. Maybe it's in your relationships. Maybe you have a kid who just went off to college and you're not sure what that experience is going to be like for you and for them. Maybe in your romantic relationships or in a friendship, there is growing pains. We grow and we evolve, and what that does to our connection to others is not always predictable. People we thought we'd always be close to, maybe we're not feeling as close, or there's conflict that needs to be resolved to resume that level of intimacy and connection. I want us all to just take a minute. I'm going to like 60 seconds. If you have a piece of paper, great. If you don't, you can just think about it and kind of make a note for yourself to kind of come back to this later. But let's just take a minute with a self-reflection question. What areas of your life feel uncertain or chaotic or unpredictable for you right now? It could be one, it could be multiple. I mean, in theory, it could be none. Yay for you if that's the season you're in right now. That's amazing. If that is the case, then maybe thinking about what was the last time you felt a lot of uncertainty or unpredictability or chaos in your life. And then I want to just take, again, 60 seconds to think about how is that showing up? And I always like to ask in three ways, right? How is it showing up in your body? Is that physical symptoms? Are you having a lot of headaches, or do you have insomnia? You're waking up in the middle of the night. Maybe you've noticed that you're having stomach aches or trouble digesting things, or your shoulders feel tight. For me, it is always a clenched jaw. You can just check in right now, like, is your jaw clenched? How is it showing up in your mood? Are you more irritable? Do you feel more withdrawn? Do you feel a little more reckless? We don't often talk about that as a way in which uncertainty and stress shows up in our moods, but it is one of the ways that it shows up. And then in your behaviors, choices you're making, things you're doing or not doing. How is these areas of your life that feel uncertain? How are they impacting you right now? If you're comfortable, this is being recorded, so I just always like for people to be mindful. You can actually send a private message if you want to just share without having anyone else see that this is your comment. But I would love for people to just sort of post in the comments if you want to share either what areas of life feel uncertain and or how you're noticing that that's showing up. Well, this is good. Okay. So, what I want to highlight for us first and foremost is there is no right way to experience this. Often we think that there is a right way. And that's not just about uncertainty and stress. That's just kind of, we think there is like a right way. And the reality is how you are going to experience the kind of stress that comes with feeling like life is uncertain, unpredictable, etc., is based on a lot of different factors. Your awareness that that's actually what you're feeling. Sometimes we're feeling things and we don't know that's what we're feeling. And therefore, how we respond to it is somewhat out of our control, out of our conscious control. Family factors, sort of personal factors. Did you grow up in a household that was often chaotic and unpredictable? Do you experience a lot of financial uncertainty or other forms of uncertainty? Maybe there was a lot of conflict or there was abuse. Or maybe you had the opposite experience where your house always felt very stable and very calm and very um, reliable. All of those things play a role in the ways in which we are going to respond and react to uncertainty and stress. It's important for you to know that so that we're not shaming or criticizing ourselves to stay calm or to handle things the way in which we see other people handling. And one of the other really important factors in how we experience uncertainty is literally skills. That's part of why this is what this webinar is about, right? Is fundamentally, sometimes we simply do not have the skills necessary to figure out what to do with our emotions when we notice our emotions. What is helpful to know is that there is kind of a natural tendency. Our brains want to make sense of the world around us. That's kind of how we're wired. It reduces our fight or flight. It helps to kind of calm our nervous system. We feel something and our brain is like, okay, let's make sense of it. I need to know what's next. And when we can't quite know what's next, we begin to create various coping strategies. And those didn't just pop up yesterday. You've been building these coping strategies since you were born. That's how it works. We all kind of create this blueprint, this toolbox of coping strategies. And so often what we think as adults is that something happens, we've interpreted what happened, and then we have feelings about it. And the reality is that things are happening. We have feelings about what's happening. And then we often create an interpretation about what's happening to match the emotional response we're having. And I'll talk a little bit about how we can slow that process down to be more responsive rather than reactive. I particularly like this quote. So, when the world feels unsafe, we must learn to create safety within. And the reality is that at various points over the course of our entire life, the world feels unsafe. And I don't mean unsafe that, they're like your house is on fire, but from an emotional standpoint, part of what happens for us is that we feel unsafe. We feel it in childhood. We wake up from a nightmare and our parent isn't there and we need soothing, but they don't hear us and they don't come. The world feels unsafe. You are an adolescent and you go to school and somebody makes fun of your shoes. The world feels unsafe. You are, in your 20s, in maybe your first very serious long-term relationship, you're in love and you have your first big fight and that person threatens to leave. The world feels unsafe. That sense of unsafety is not just in the very kind of external ways that we often think about it or immediate danger ways. A lack of emotional safety to our bodies, to our nervous system, is really kind of the same experience as if a tiger were chasing us. And so when it feels like things are uncertain and unpredictable, the best sort of strategy for us is to learn how to develop tools that create a sense of safety internally. And what I mean by that is essentially that we learn to self-soothe. We learn to feel grounded. We learn to feel resilient within ourselves. And it doesn't mean that you don't panic. It doesn't mean you don't get scared. It doesn't mean that you don't feel stress or overwhelm. It means, however, that you have the capacity to tolerate those feelings and then still choose the way you want to show up and make decisions that feel empowering and in your best interest over the long term. And the way we do that, oftentimes what we're told is the way to do that is through self-care. Unfortunately, self-care is not enough. Thanks, Mary. It is simply not an adequate resource for all the ways in which we can feel unsafe and feel like life is very unpredictable. Even though this is the message that we get is if you just do the right kind of self-care and you just do enough self-care, you're going to be fine. I want to be clear. Self-care is very important. I'm going to talk about where this fits into the overall model that I'm going to share with you, but it is simply not enough to sustain us. And there are a number of reasons that this can be true, but I'm going to talk about sort of my three favorites because I think they're really useful. One is the commodification of care. Self-care is like $1 trillion industry. It is bath bombs and massages and adaptogenic mushroom coffee and Pelotons, and it is all the things, right? It is your therapist. It is your, silent retreat. It's all of these things, your yoga studio. Um, when we turn our care, right, like the care necessary to survive, to thrive in the world, into something to be bought, only something to be bought and sold, it becomes problematic. One, it shames the vast majority of us who can't afford to buy all the self-care things, right? We Few of us can afford to buy every self-care product that's out there, to pay for every retreat and every treatment and every supplement and every workout routine and hire all the like it creates a dynamic that makes us feel as though we are coming up short, which is counterproductive to the goals of self-care. And it's also something that really begins to exclude a large proportion of people. Like I'm talking about, well, we can't afford all of it, but there are many, many people who are in fact experiencing high levels of uncertainty, high levels of stress and chaos and unpredictability in their lives because of socioeconomic factors. And then we've kind of said, well, the solution to how you feel is this thing that also you really have no access to. And that's an unhelpful model for us, just sort of as a community of people. Two, and this is really for all my other type A's out there who love a to-do list, who are checking things off, who like to be productive. I'm raising my hand, I'm in that camp. Oftentimes self-care becomes just another task on the to-do list. It is one more thing for you to either succeed at or fail at, day to day, week by week, month by month. Am I doing self-care well? Did I do all the things? Did I do my mental health walk? Did I drink my 8 gallons of water? I know it's not 8 gallons. Can you tell that I'm not great at drinking all my water? I don't even know the right numbers. But it becomes sort of one more thing to do. And again, if our goal is about creating a more effective stress management to really help us to feel good about ourselves, in our bodies, in our lives, having more things on the to-do list is oftentimes not the right answer. And finally, and this is important, it's really important. I want everybody to sort of catch the nuance here. I am not saying that self-care is inherently selfish. It's not. It is absolutely essential that you learn to prioritize yourself and your well-being above everything else. And also, when our care for ourselves is hyper individualistic, which oftentimes self-care is, it can become, probably the better word here is self-absorbed. The example I often like to use, and you'll see why I like to use this because we'll talk a little bit more about the role of relationships in a few minutes, is we all hear people talking about protecting their peace, and I put up my boundaries, and when our self-care is so centered on our immediate comfort, we forget that, you know what? Your sister might irritate you like 5 days out of the week, but maybe she's also the relationship where you can be your most authentic self. She is the person who you can call at 3 a.m. for any reason whatsoever, and she's got your back. Well, that relationship, however irritating it is on a sort of day-to-day mundane level, the role that plays in sustaining your mental health and your well-being is crucial. It deserves for you to be uncomfortable sometimes to make it work. And when we, again, sort of become only focused on what makes me feel good, to the exclusion of our relationships, to the exclusion of our community, the exclusion of our need to be connected to others, then we are missing out on a very key component about what is actually going to sustain us. So, what's the answer? Self-compassion. If you've been here from the beginning, you already knew this was coming. So, self-care and self-compassion are similar, but they're not the same thing. The overarching theme here that I want to share is that self-care is more about what we do to take care of ourselves, where self-compassion is much more about a way of being with ourselves. It is a set of values, it is a set of beliefs, it is a sort of intrinsic way of operating when it comes to our value and our worth as human beings. And so it it works on multiple levels, and therefore it is far more effective than simply doing self-care. Self-care is a component, but is not the whole thing. And self-care is more like habits and activities, right, that we do. And self-compassion, as I'm going to talk about, is really about learning a new way of being, and learning how to focus on simply being. So there are three components to self-compassion. I'm going to talk about the first one. Um, and I'm saying the first one, it's the first one in this series of slides. One is not more important than the other. I would encourage everybody, after I've talked about the three pillars of self-compassion, to actually do a little self-reflection. Which one of these comes easiest to you? And which one of these seems to be most challenging or is sort of the most off your radar? Because that gives you a little bit of awareness in terms of where you might want to focus some energy over the next 30 days, 60 days, the rest of the year, as you're cultivating your self-compassion practice. So first, in my series, mindful awareness. Mindful awareness, and I know for a lot of people, this immediately goes to a thought of like meditation. And I used a picture of a woman meditating, so I didn't help that. Meditation is a wonderful way to cultivate and sort of refine your mindful awareness, but it is not the only way to do that. And I'll talk about a couple of other ways to do that. But I want to talk first about what mindful awareness is. Mindful awareness essentially is the slowing down. I think I talked about that a few minutes ago, right? It is simply slowing down and becoming aware of what is happening inside of you and around you. So it's no longer being on autopilot, which most of us are for a lot of the day. I think many of you know that feeling. You get in the car and then you look up and you're home, or at the grocery store, or your kid's school, or wherever you are. And you don't really remember the drive at all. You don't remember what you passed. You don't like autopilot. And that's not just sort of the one-off kind of that mindless driving. It happens in big and small ways throughout our day. Mindful awareness helps us to tune in. And it's really important because it helps us to differentiate our stress from the stress in the world around us, whether that's from people in our lives or from the global stress, the larger sort of societal stress around us. And that is really key to sustaining ourselves. Part of our ability to create safety within is being able to know when sometimes what we're feeling is not actually ours. Like that's not my stress. Oh, that's not my fear. I'm just sort of picking it up because everybody else is really afraid about this. But if I slow down and think about it, this is not something that really creates a lot of panic for me personally. That differentiation is crucial to your well-being. It's really, really important. It is also tied into sort of our ability to create some radical acceptance. And I think that's a useful practice. We could have a whole separate webinar on radical acceptance, to be honest with you. It is a much broader concept than this, but at a very basic level, some oversimplification, it is being able to say that it is what it is, but it's not who I am. So it's being able to acknowledge what's happening, whether it's happening to you or around you, and recognize that that is not your character. It's not your identity. It is simply one of a multitude of factors that's happening in the world around you. Mindful awareness helps you to do this. Now, some ways to cultivate mindful awareness. Obviously, meditation is helpful. In particular, mindfulness-based meditations are really useful, but there are a multitude of different types of meditation you could try. Guided meditation, walking meditation, transcendental meditation. There's a lot of options out there. So if you have tried it before and it didn't work for you, I really encourage you to try some new ways of doing it. Try a different teacher, try a different style, see what works. There are a number of incredibly valuable benefits to cultivating a bit of meditation, whatever that looks like. But there are other ways that we can do this. I like to say stillness, like literally when I wake up in the morning, I just like sit or lay in silence, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes it's 45 minutes. I'm not sleeping, I'm not trying to think about anything, I'm just quiet. Mindful awareness, right? It's a practice. The other, I think, less obvious sort of strategy here is creativity. Try something creative. It could be pottery, it could be drawing or coloring or paint, it could be cooking. The goal here is not so much, it could just be admiring other people's art. The goal is not to perfect it, is not to be good at art. The goal is to get in a state of flow that allows you to sort of, again, notice the process that happens internally. All right, our second component of self-compassion is self-kindness. And this is where self-care fits from my perspective, perfectly. Self-kindness is simply the practice of treating yourself well, kindly, tenderly, gently, with unconditional positive regard, which means that really treating yourself in a way that says, I deserve love and patience and grace and goodness and care at all times, period. Not after I get my work done, not if I don't make mistakes, not all the time. You are deserving of that all of the time. And that is what, and this is why I say, self compassion practice. We do not live in any of these spaces 100% of the time. Often I find when I talk about self kindness at first glance, most people think, oh, I do this well. And then at second glance, oftentimes I get people saying, oh, I'm not actually as good at this as I thought I was. Some simple ways, first of all, is your self-care activities. And I'll talk more about how to make them really fit into self-kindness and kind of create a way of where your self-care activities start to reinforce the self-kindness aspect. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but it's important for a number of reasons, but because we're talking about uncertainty and unpredictability and chaos, one of the things about self-kindness is that I think that it is a really helpful way to protect ourselves from the often dehumanizing and devaluing messages we get. And whatever your personal identities are, racially, based on gender, based on culture, based on any number of, your profession, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what your identity is. The reality is that there are so many things about the way we sort of move through our modern life that most of us are being hit with messages that really kind of dehumanize us, right? Like kind of minimize or reduce us from a full complex human being into a productive worker or just a mom or only a husband or only, right? Like there's a lot of ways where we are not given the opportunity to be our full, most beautiful selves, most complex selves. And that includes all of our imperfections, right? We don't always feel like those get to come out. And self-kindness is about cultivating a space internally for all of those parts of you, for all of those parts of you to feel loved and cared for. And finally, common humanity. This is sort of in the research, or if you pick up some books, there's some books I would recommend. One being Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. You'll see common humanity being named. I often talk about this as connection and community. The reason common humanity at a research level, there are a number of reasons why this is important. One is it simply reminds us that we are not alone. And I think when we are facing, again, stress, uncertainty, unpredictability, life feels chaotic and dangerous and unsafe, we also feel very isolated. I am struggling with fill in the blank. I don't have the support I need. I don't know what's going to happen to me. And the reality is that at any given moment, whatever we're feeling, and I don't mean your exact situation, but whatever we are feeling, there are billions of other humans on this planet who are feeling it too, or have felt it in the past, or are going to be feeling it next month. We are part of a shared experience, and reminding ourselves that we are not alone is really, really, really helpful. It is a way in which we are able to pull back from that sense of isolation And the isolation can be really, really detrimental to our mental health. We are really wired to be connected, and our relationships and our sense of belonging to community, both at a very micro level, like in your most interpersonal, closest relationships, and also at a macro level, right? Belonging to some group of people, whether it's your family or your workplace or a college community, or it is shared identity community belonging to a particular race or ethnicity or gender or sexual orientation. That stuff is so incredibly important to our sense of well-being, and oftentimes we minimize that. We overemphasize the sort of one or two relationships in our lives, oftentimes a romantic relationship, and we forget how important it is to feel loved and seen and valued by a wide range of individuals and people. And so it's important for you to be a part of relationships and social spaces that honor your humanity and empower, encourage you. Um, that is going to be, honestly, more than a good bubble bath. Your connection to other people is going to be one of the most important things you can do for sustainable well-being. So obviously, I think this is super important. Um, so we're going to talk about finding our people. And by this, I just mean the multitude of people that you need to be connected to. Our relationships, um, sort of think of it as almost like overlapping and concentric circles. There's your, it's noisy outside here. There's your inner circle, right? The people who you're closest to, you tell almost anything to. And then there's kind of like the broader circle, your wider range of friends and family who you feel connected to, maybe coworkers, and then a wider circle and a wider circle. And then there's also overlapping circles, right? There's a sense of, if you've ever, it's a good example. Oh, if you've ever gone to like a concert and it's your favorite artist, and like you and 10,000 people are singing the exact same song together. That's a moment of connection. That's a moment of feeling like you're part of community, right? Like it isn't always just the immediate ways in which we think about connection and community, but it is really important for us to be really a little bit more intentional, a little bit aware of that. When we feel deeply cared for, we have a greater capacity to care for not only ourselves, but each other. And that is really why this is so key. If you want sustainable self-care, you want a sustainable practice to nurture and tend to your own well-being, you have to have and cultivate some meaningful relationships in your life. And what's meaningful to you may not be seen as meaningful to the next person. We're all unique in that way, but relationships matter. They're important. Um, and yeah, I think it's just, I guess that first bullet, when you feel like whoever it is, whenever you feel like there's somebody out in the world who doesn't care about you, who doesn't see you, doesn't value you, it is very easy. It is almost unconscious the ways in which we internalize that message, that feeling starts to become our inner dialogue. And it is all of these other relationships where people reflect back our value and our worth and how special and what we bring to the table. That is what helps to sort of mitigate those messages and keep us doing well. So, a couple of quick ways to build more community. I know that, I think the Surgeon General came out, I think it was earlier this year, or it was maybe later, maybe it was the end of last year, and talked about the fact that loneliness is literally a global epidemic. It is bad not only for your mental health, it is bad for your physical health. It's, if you are not familiar with that, it's definitely worth a Google so you can kind of see the impact it has. So in our modern, oversaturated with content and technology lives, how do we build community? Well, first, you can do it online. That's like, use the tools we have. It's totally fine. One way to do that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of like at all the different levels. So at the macro level, right? If you're like, I just don't have a big community that I belong to, advocacy and activism, like volunteering about whatever it is that's important to you, right? It is immediately giving you access to people who have a shared value with you. You may not share all the values, but if you join a group that, reads to children at the library once a week because you think literacy is really important, or you think that, books and or just engaging with community children is like that's a value for you. You're going to meet other people who think that's valuable to you, right? You're going to begin to build connection around the things that are most important to you. And so I often suggest advocacy and activism, not just because it improves our communities and our larger community and society, but because it really does help you to have an immediate connection with a group around something that is actually really important to you. Second is fun is contagious. Do fun things. You've been out and something silly happens and you start laughing, and the stranger standing next to you also starts laughing. When we are engaging with and looking for what is fun and enjoyable, and we bring that energy, we are going to attract other people who want to do that. And so if you think to yourself, my friends never want to go anywhere, no one ever wants to do something fun, you got two options. And I suggest you do both. One, be the person who invites other people out. Now, if you're like, I already am that person, and maybe invite different groups of people out. Sometimes we have to like expand, right? Don't invite the same old people, invite some new people, invite your coworker, invite your neighbor up the street, whatever. And two, go out by yourself. Go do fun things. I am a huge proponent of solo dates. Again, if you're out having fun, even though you left on your own, doesn't mean you won't connect with new people and make friends. And they could be friends for the night while you're doing this fun activity. And they might become friends for a lifetime. We won't know until we try. And finally, connection starts within. And this ties into the solo dates, is if you do not feel connected to yourself, you do not have a sense of awareness. What do I like? What brings me joy? What makes me laugh? What are my top 3 values? If those questions give you pause to try to figure it out, I encourage you to spend some time there first. And if that feels a little bit painful or it's upsetting, because sometimes it is upsetting to realize we are not sure what we want, what we feel, I would encourage you to think about, seeking a therapist to kind of sit with you and figure out, when did I become disconnected from these parts of myself and how do you reconnect to them? Because we do need to be connected to ourselves if we want to be connected to others. Okay, 3 strategies. These are your 3 action items to go home and to start doing. This is how we build sustainable self-compassion. Notice I said more than bubble baths, because when it comes to self-care, I am a highly advocate for bubble baths. It's fantastic. If you're not taking baths, just try it. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. So number 1, we're going to slow down and tune in, because mindful awareness. Number 2, we're going to start where we are, because you have self-care practices in your life right now that with a little intentionality can become self-kindness. And 3, we're going to celebrate the journey, and we're going to celebrate with people because we want to be connected. So let's take a second and talk about tuning into ourselves. How do you actually listen to you? Well, 3 things. You see, I like 3s. 3s are easy to remember. Every client I've probably ever had in the last, maybe not my whole career, so maybe in the last decade, already knows number 1, be curious. Can we be curious? I'm curious about that feeling. I'm curious what would happen if I tried this in a different way. Tuning into yourself requires us to begin to let go of that self-critical voice, of the harsh judgment, of the parts of ourselves that wants to control and manipulate and interpret and be in charge and all those things. And so when we practice curiosity, it becomes easier to tune in, because if you tune in and immediately there's an internal criticism, you don't really want to keep tuning in, right? But when we tune in with curiosity, how do I really feel today? Oh, that's interesting. Why do I feel anxious? Can I be curious about that anxiety that came up, as opposed to being like, oh my gosh, why am I anxious again? Oh, I've been doing all these breathing exercises and I'm doing the meditation and I don't, right? We kind of get down a path, but curiosity says, let's just be slow and just notice. So it's a really helpful practice, and it really is just simple to implement. Ask yourself questions and be mindful of the negative inner dialogue that comes up. Number 2, be consistent. This is why curiosity works, because be curious seems fairly simple, right? Curiosity works when we are consistent. You are not going to immediately eliminate your negative self-talk or your inner critic or your any habit that gets in the way, right, of your self-compassion without practice. So we must be consistent. Now, consistency can look like a lot of things. Consistency can be, I journal every single morning. Consistency could be, I go for a mindfulness walk once a month, right? The frequency isn't quite as important, certainly not at the beginning, as just having a commitment to do the thing over and over and over again. And finally, building our emotional awareness. And one thing that if you happen to be on a live stream, let's say on YouTube or LinkedIn, um, head over to the website, group-therapy-associates.com/webinars, and make sure you sign up, because that's the only way I'm going to get your email address. And I will send out an email tomorrow with with a feelings poster. Naming your feelings is key, but if you don't have the vocabulary, then you can't name them all. So we're going to help you help yourself by sharing a little feelings poster that you can download and print. You can print it on letterhead. You can send it to your favorite photo printing place and they can blow it up as a big poster, however you like to have that. And then one of the simplest ways, and we're going to practice this together for a second, to tune into ourselves is to just get quiet and breathe. Now, I like this little circle. It helps me to take some nice, clear, deep breaths. But I'm actually going to invite everybody to do a different kind of breathing exercise with me. So hopefully, if this visual throws you off, you can close your eyes or just look away from the screen. What I want you to do is we're going to take like 30 seconds. I'm going to even set a timer, because 30 seconds seems like feels long when you're doing this sometimes. I just want you to notice your breath. I don't want you to take a deep breath. I don't want you to breathe out. I just want you to notice your own natural rhythm of breathing. I want you to notice that your body knows exactly what you need every single second. So I'm going to stop talking for about 20 seconds. And I just want you, again, just notice your breath. If the circle bothers you, close your eyes, but just, that's it. Pay attention to the breathing. Okay. So there's a lot of, we actually have some resources around breath work, and there's a lot of different breathing exercises that can be really, really helpful. But as a starting point, I like to just remind us all that our breath is there. It's with us all of the time. And when you stop for a second and notice it, it falls into its more natural rhythm. Sometimes we're breathing very shallowly because we're stressed or I'm talking a lot or whatever. Just noticing that as a way of, again, tuning in to your body. You don't have to control it. The point is to be curious and to tune in. So I mentioned starting where you are, and that's because you got all you need. If we think about self-care as part of our self-kindness, one of the ways that we can make self-kindness more of our focus, right? Like really cultivate the self-kindness part of our self-compassion practice is to simply create intention around the self-care activities you do. So the example I often will use is my own. Obviously, well, hopefully, obviously, exercise is a great self-care activity, right? Getting up, and I don't love going to the gym. I like to walk outside. And so I've been trying to get up, and I go to a local park and I go for, a mile or two walk. And I am somebody who does not I like to get up and have my coffee and do my meditation and get to work. I don't actually love exercise. And so for a long time, I get up and I do it and I sort of grumble. "Ah, I gotta go do this thing. Right. Like I'm doing it. It's good for my body. Still get the benefits out of the walk. But my intention around it is sort of going back to early slides. It was a self-care activity on my to-do list that I needed to check off. It was not, didn't feel like a gift. So as I have worked on my own self-compassion practice, I am intentional. Even though sometimes I start out grumbling, I intentionally say, sometimes out loud, often now just in my head, I get to do this for myself. I deserve to be out in nature because it makes me feel better to move my body because it keeps my back from being stiff. And, I'm at a certain age, you got to move your body if you want to keep these joints, you know, fresh and limber and flexible well into old age, right? It is a gift that I'm giving myself. Simply adding the intention, right? Like being intentional about saying, this is something I want to do for me because I deserve to be treated with kindness and care. And this walk is a way that I treat my body with kindness and care. That's it. It's like 10 extra seconds to my what was already a self-care practice. So I encourage you to think about, what are you already doing as part of your self-care that you can simply add a self-kindness intention on top of. The point here is to focus on sort of being in the process as opposed to just checking a thing off to do, your to-do list. And gratitude. I talked about celebrating our journey, right? One of the things that I think a lot of us have heard, gratitude is really important. It's very helpful. There's a lot of good research about it. One of my favorite books, and the book isn't actually not about gratitude, it's about burnout. But there's a book called Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. They're sisters. And in that book, they reference some research around gratitude. And what they talk about is that it's actually more important for us and more beneficial for us, I should say, to practice gratitude for the process and for the people, right? Don't just focus on the achievement, on the end goal, but can you celebrate how you've grown and evolved? Can you be grateful for what various people and those relationships bring into your life? When we get more focused on process, again, it's sort of a tuning in, it's a mindfulness awareness, but it also, I think, helps us to work on the relational skills as well, right? Whether that's in relationship to other people, right? So I'm not just grateful for my mom. I mean, I am, right? But just sort of in a generic way, I am grateful for the love and care that she puts into like cooking. One, because when I see her, I eat really, really well. But also because it was a gift that now I also experience love and kindness and sort of a generosity around like food and preparing meals. And so not only is that a way that I pour into other relationships in my life, it's a way I pour into myself. Every time I make myself a really great lunch, or, oh, last night I made a chicken pot pie from scratch, which I know lots of people don't like, but is like ultimate comfort food for me. I made it from scratch. I ate it, but it feels like love, right? But because I'm able to sort of recognize that I'm grateful for this very specific thing and the feelings that come with that, it opens the door for us to experience our connections in a much deeper way. And again, this is about cultivating that common humanity, that community, that connection piece. Um, so thinking about your gratitude a little bit differently will be really, really helpful. And then more specifically to celebrating your journey, I want to encourage everybody. I say this every time I do a corporate workshop in particular, is we have to redefine what success means. We have to actually sit and say, what is success in this scenario? Is it I showed up every day? Is it I showed up and I was not irritable? Is it I achieved the goal? I finished the project? Sometimes it's just that I tried this thing that was way out of my comfort zone and required skills I didn't quite have yet. And the fact that I said yes and gave it my all, that's a win. Whatever it is for you, but to be flexible in how we define success is really, really key. Again, for your self compassion practice and your journey. So those are two things. Like you can literally you can do it at a per thing kind of level, right? Maybe you're working on a project right now. Maybe you just started a new hobby or a new exercise class or something like that, or a new health habit. What does success mean in each of those categories? I also would encourage you to think about like, what does success mean to you at a high level? Like if you thought about your own personal definition of success, what does that mean? Write it down. Put it up on the wall. Look at that. Reflect on that. How does it feel when you look at that? How does that shape the way you think about other things you're doing? How does it shape the way you think about your relationships and connection? Um, it seems like such a simple thing, but again, this is about sort of this practice. How do we become more aware? How do we become more mindful? How do we create more kindness and connection in our lives? Hopefully you've already gotten this message, but if you haven't, this is what I hope that you take away from tonight's webinar. Focus on you first and the rest will follow. This is really key. Like your self-compassion will turn your inner care into outer care with so much more ease, so much more generosity, and in a way that is sustainable. When we are constantly pouring into other people, pouring, and we have nothing left for us, and then we have to like isolate and withdraw and like refuel, and then we pour it all out again. Self-compassion literally creates kind of an internal well, an internal spring where we feel fully cared for, fully resourced, that it becomes easy to pour into other people. It becomes easy to give to others. And that's really where we want to go. So I'm going to talk a little bit. I want to invite everybody who is watching, if you have questions, comments, you have your own ideas, you disagree with something I said, whatever it is, please share in the comment section. I would really, really love to hear from all of you and answer any questions that you may have. While you're doing that, I'm going to just talk a little bit about what we do when we might need more help. Hopefully, a lot of the things I talked about feel like, oh, I could try this. Maybe they don't feel easy, but they feels like you can try it. But sometimes we need more help. And so I'm going to actually read these questions. I think these are really this is not a formal diagnostic tool or, it's not doing any of those things. But I think these 3 questions really help if you're wondering, do I need to be working with somebody? Is it time for me to maybe get a therapist's opinion? Maybe it could be short-term, it could be long-term work. There's a lot of fluctuation in that. But one is, do I feel overwhelmed or hopeless when I think about trying to change my experience? So in this case, right, like we've been talking a lot about self-compassion. If you think about trying to cultivate more self-compassion, or if you think about trying to navigate the uncertainty that are in your life, whatever areas those are, if that feels like really overwhelming or creates a sense of hopelessness, like I don't imagine that this could change, that's a good sign that it might be time to get a little bit more help. 2, has anyone in your life suggested therapy or some other kind of help in the last 3 months? Maybe they asked about a coach. Maybe they said, had you considered, talking to your doctor or your pastor? Or people suggest sort of professional help in a variety of ways. But if somebody you love and trust has suggested that to you, I think sometimes we have to lean into our networks so that we don't always see what we need, which is why, again, community and connection is so important, because sometimes they see it before we can see it. And then finally, on a scale of 1 to 5, how serious am I about wanting things to change? It's not just one of these questions, but some combination of these is really useful for you to kind of evaluate. And we have a couple of things. One, we have a quiz, finding the right therapist for you, which is kind of a great way to kind of figure out what you might be looking for in terms of support. And we do have, I'm going to talk about that. I think we have a slide. Oh, we do. A mental health checkup. Normally, this is, I'm just going to let everybody know. I know that it says here, to use the code webinar to get $50 off. In honor of World Mental Health Day, we are actually offering our mental health checkups at 150 instead of the 275, which is a far better deal than this webinar code. So all you have to do is go to the website. We could happy to send a link. This is a one session deal, right? This is not necessarily a commitment to ongoing therapy or coaching or anything else, but it's an opportunity to get some professional insight on just how you're doing. It is a 60-minute session with one of our clinicians. And prior to the session, you will be sent some online assessments. We'll help you to assess for things like depression, anxiety, just your overall work-life balance, a sense of flourishing, your stress levels. None of them take very long to complete, but they give you a score. And we have some other specialized things around complicated grief or PTSD. All of those additional assessments can be included at no charge. And then you get an hour with a therapist to just go over it and to think about, like, hey, what do the scores say? But more than what do the scores say, what do you have to say? What's happening for you? So if that's of interest, would really encourage you to check your email for a link to get there, or just visit the website. You can go to the website now and find that from the homepage. This is a little more information about group therapy associates and kind of what I know I said, thinking about what are your top 3 values. These are probably sort of our top 4 values. Oh, Mary, thank you for sharing in the comments. I'm gonna check the comments now. Yeah, it's funny. I need that reminder as well a lot of the times that, the better I care for me, the better I can care for everyone else, which is huge. Oh, resources to help people find a community. This is a great question, David. What's up? So I would say I'm going to give these are the resources I offer my clients. And I think that one of the things that we work to do at GTA is also curate resource lists and things like that. And so I would say, again, if you're live streaming from somewhere else and you're not already on our email list, get on our email list. We'll definitely send a lot of things out. But a couple of the things that I would suggest is, again, one is leaving the house. I just said this to a client yesterday. The community you seek is not coming to your door. I mean, maybe, I guess, if you were thinking about working for UPS or Amazon or DoorDash, and those will be your new coworkers. But the reality is that if you're not looking for professional community in one of those organizations, and you're just looking for people who share your values or your interests, you got to get outside. And I know with work and life and kids and those, it's hard sometimes for all of us, but I would encourage people still use Meetup. Like, there's meetups for everything, hiking, arts, whatever you want to do. For those of you who happen to be in the DC area, because that's where we are based, I know this is true in other cities, except that you also have to pay for them. But in DC, because the museums are free, the museums are an amazing place to start building community. They have classes and events and groups that you can join and lectures you can attend to. I really kind of come back to thinking about what are your values, and then just seeking that out, going and participating in some sort of connection somewhere can be really, really helpful for you to be connected, to sort of manage that loneliness. I also want to just make this point. Sometimes we are in community with people. We have a lot of friends, we have a lot of family, we go out regularly, we're part of, various organizations, maybe you're part of a church or a civic organization, and you still feel lonely. That's a real thing. And I think it's important for us to sort of name that. If that's an experience that people are having, that is definitely, I think, a great opportunity to, whether it's just a little mental health checkup or, doing some ongoing work with a therapist, it's really helpful to recognize that we can be lonely in rooms full of people. And so if loneliness feels pervasive, it's useful for you to maybe consider just seeking a little bit more support, that just beyond just sort of meeting more people and going out a little bit more often. And finally, I'm going to say don't scan that QR code from your screens. Just check your email. This particular webinar does not come with a workbook per se, but it will. Uh, you will get access to our feelings poster. We'll be sending that along with some other resources. We are 3 minutes over time, but I think we started at 6:03, so it's kind of perfect. Are there any other questions or comments last minute you want to jump into the comments? Please do. This recording will be available. Again, check your emails. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. This is a topic that I love talking about, and I really, the comments have been great. And I hope that everybody who is here had an opportunity to take something away from this experience and the resources shared. Have a wonderful night. Good luck with your self-compassion practice. Don't forget to check your emails and fill out your surveys. I really appreciate it. Good night, everybody.